Hello, fantasy football fans. Welcome to the free agency preview episode of the 9 Route. I'm Austin Lee. He is Alex Melio. We both write for Football Guys, and we just want to help you out, help you get ready for the fantasy season. We're the show that goes deep to help you win. That's what our slogan comes from, the 9 Route thing. Alex, hey, how's it going, man?
You're right. It's not because we're on at 9 o'clock Pacific time, as some people have pointed out. I'm doing all right.
It's a nice coincidence that it worked out that way.
I realize I just missed a total opportunity to completely change wardrobes. But we're back for our second of our doubleheader.
Yes! It's awesome. It feels great. And we've got a lot of fun free agents to cover here, and we're looking forward to that. Tell me, what's something you've done over the past couple of months, football-wise, that you're excited about?
A lot. No,
you've been busy, haven't you?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's been a lot to write. I mean, there's no offseason for football, so ever since even before the Super Bowl began, we were already looking at free agency, trying to figure out what the salary cap would be, who's going to be cut, who's going to be available, who's going to be re-signed. So, a lot of intriguing stuff like every offseason, and potentially a lot of moving parts. Some really exciting potential free agents. It could be this free agent class is loaded, assuming that they hit free agency, and it I'm assuming that a lot of them are going to get re-signed. Although, it's funny, free agency hits next week, and in March 10th.
March 10th.
So, and we haven't gotten a lot of movement as far as re-signing goes. More cuts than anything. We still haven't gotten a salary cap, which I think is part of the problem. It feels like it's a little late this year. We think it's going to be around $143 million, and franchise tags are due this Monday, I believe. So, or is it next Monday? I think it's next Monday. But anyway.
Yeah, that's when it's going to start to get real interesting, because a lot of these teams are trying to sign guys they don't want to franchise and try to work that out before they have to deal with free agency. So this is my favorite, time aside from the draft. Like, I get really excited about free agency. So
it's like having a bunch of it's like the NFL is like Legoland, and every year at this time, you just break half of it and put it all back together for the next few months.
I'm just imagining like pushing Dez Bryant over, and he just falls into a pile of Legos. That was the visual.
This is the next Lego movie. It's like an NFL season following a towel boy who becomes the star of the team. If you're listening out there, talent agents or whatever, give me a call.
Yeah. Everything's awesome. That's all.
Everything is awesome.
Yeah, everything's awesome when it comes to free agency. So, except for maybe the free agent quarterbacks. Let's start there.
That is not awesome.
No, not quite so awesome. You've got big names like Mark Sanchez and Jake Locker and Josh
Tim Tebow's a free agent.
Tim Tebow, Brian Hoyer. It's kind of ugly. I think Ryan Mallett is the only one that looks interesting on this list, and I think he's just going to re-sign with his current team. Like, I don't think he's going anywhere. Like, are any of these guys interesting to you?
No. Let's move on. No, I mean, there's almost no value in terms of, especially in terms of fantasy football, for any of these guys, except, as you said, Ryan Mallett. Depending, I think that in Houston he has more value than he does elsewhere. But that also depends on whether Andre Johnson stays, which he's got a big cap number. They might restructure, or they might trade him. Who knows? But I mean, I think you're right. He's probably the most intriguing guy.
Yeah, because you got some other like over the hill guys like Sean Hill is over the hill, Michael Vick, Matt Hasselbeck.
I mean, I think I mentioned this earlier this season. Every year I have this epiphany that Matt Hasselbeck is still in the league. It's like, December 2nd, I'm like, Matt Hasselbeck is still in the league? What? I thought he retired 5 years ago. And yeah, he's a free agent.
Yeah, that's how I feel about Mark Brunell. I sort of like imagine that he'll always be in the league.
Yeah.
Somewhere backing up like Drew Brees or something. I don't know. I'm looking down a list of like 20 free agents here, and it's like, Colt McCoy might be a decent backup somewhere. Yeah, it's ugly. It's ugly. Yeah, I think Brian Hoyer, maybe if for some miracle he retains the Cleveland starting job. No, that's
Well, I heard that they didn't want him. I misread what I was reading today, but it sounds like Cleveland just doesn't, want to have any quarterbacks.
yeah, yes, exactly.
They're gonna roll with, what's his name?
Yeah, what's his name is going to be good.
Yes, him.
Johnny Football is just going to run the ball every play.
Johnny Foosball.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ben Tate is going to come
Benjamin.
back.
I was trying to think of Travis Benjamin.
Yeah.
Quarterback. Let's move on. This is ridiculous. Let's move on.
Okay, all right. Let's talk about something more interesting, like running backs. There is a ton of running back goodness here. The question is, with all of this running back availability, does that suddenly make all their values go down sort of collectively because there's so many options?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of options. There's only a couple of really good options, but there's still some quality there. Obviously, DeMarco Murray is a big name. We don't know what's going to happen with him. The Cowboys don't have a ton of cap space right now, but they could like Brandon Cargo. They could, if the salary cap comes in higher, maybe they can use some of the extra money to entice DeMarco Murray to stay. There's talk about the Cowboys maybe bringing in Adrian Peterson if he's cut. There's that dynamic, but it's tough. Murray's value is kind of weird because last year the top running back contract was 3 years, $11.5 million. That's ridiculous. That won't happen with Murray, but he's not going to get the contract that he would have gotten if he had done this 5 years ago. So if the waters are lukewarm, he might just want to stay in Dallas where he's got a good thing going.
Yeah, the guy that's maybe most intriguing to me is Mark Ingram. I've not been the biggest Mark Ingram supporter throughout his career, but he looked really good last year, and I do not think the Saints are bringing him back. The Saints, you've written a lot about this on Bleacher Report. The Saints have the worst salary cap situation, and I don't think they're bringing Ingram back. I think he could really shine as a feature back for somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, he looked good. He ran hard last year. He tried, I think it was obvious he was, he was in a contract year and he was trying to prove himself. And I thought he did. I mean, he had that injury early on that kind of derailed the season a little bit, but ultimately I think he barely made it over 1,000 yards and had a pretty good season. It'd be interesting to see where he might land. If he lands in a good situation with a good offensive line, he could have a big year.
Yeah, definitely. How do you feel about C.J. Spiller? Yeah, he's kind of a guy who's, we've seen flashes of greatness and we've seen a lot of terribleness. And there's been questions as to whether that's usage and coaching or in scheme or if that's him. What do you think?
I think that one play for C.J. Spiller last year was a microcosm of his career, and that is the 50-some-odd yard scamper that he had where he fell at the end of it and broke his collarbone and was out for the rest of the year. It was a really unfortunate injury, and that's kind of been what C.J. Spiller's career has been all about, like the promise of this big numbers where he just hasn't delivered. He's been injured or the Bills I don't think have used him as well as they could have. They also didn't have a very good offensive line. I'm trying to imagine Spiller in a situation like, let's say DeMarco Murray leaves and the Cowboys don't get Adrian Peterson. Could he do well in Dallas? And I think he could. They have a really good offensive line, and it's a good situation to be in. But I wouldn't count on him. He's been kind of flaky the past couple of years.
Yeah, well, he broke one collarbone. Ryan Mathews broke two, so does that make him twice as bad? Like, what does Mathews have any possibility here?
He's twice as lucky, right? He's breaking your wishbone.
I don't think San Diego's going to bring Mathews back. Do you?
No, I think that they might draft a running back, or roll with Danny Woodhead and Donald Brown.
Man, that just kind of makes me throw up in my mouth a little bit to think.
No, but they have Brandon Oliver. Remember, he did well.
Oh yeah.
Year, so. But yeah, they could probably sign somebody. Maybe Reggie Bush. Excuse me, maybe a Reggie Bush. Yeah, right. Yeah. See, now we're getting to the point. There's a lot of running backs, but there's not that many great ones in the free agency class.
I think I'd rather have Roy Helu. Like, I feel like Helu can do some of the things that Bush does, and I'd like to see what he would do with a little bit more workload.
Yeah.
Or Shane Vereen might hit free agency if the Pats don't bring him back, which they don't usually bring their running backs back. So, Vereen could be an interesting pass catching guy. While we're talking about Reggie Bush like guys.
Yeah, I mean, I saw somebody tweet today that they think maybe Bush will land in New England, which would be an interesting spot because that's kind of like the one spot he would land where I would think he would have some big games. But it's also the one spot he would land where, everybody would be excited and be totally bamboozled by Bill Belichick. So if a running back signs with the Patriots, expect him to have 2 big games, and neither game you will have him in your lineup. So
yeah, exactly. He'll be a daily fantasy option for you in tournaments.
Yes.
But other than that, don't fool with New England running backs. This isn't the Corey Dillon show. Any of these other guys stand out to you as interesting? Justin Forsett, has been talk about going back to Baltimore. Maybe not.
That's the only spot he'd have value. I mean, he thrived in Gary Kubiak's system, but Gary Kubiak left, so I don't know if he'd have quite as good of a time this year. I mean, I don't trust Forsett, to repeat last year.
What about a weird sort of maybe sleeper option like Antone Smith or something, where we haven't seen him get a whole lot of work, but he's got this big playability.
Big play, Antone Smith.
Yeah.
He's I mean, he showed what he could do, but there's also a reason why the Falcons didn't have him in regularly. I don't think they were, really that dense to not put him in. Just save for a few plays and then he just breaks one. So, he's kind of an interesting option, a guy that could have some big plays for any team, it seems like, but not a guy I would count on kind of on a week in and week out basis.
I think that if the Falcons had run him 20 times a game instead of like 5 times a game,
he'd have 1,400 yards a game.
Yeah, exactly. Every play would be a 50-yard touchdown.
Yes.
Every single play. I think that was their mistake last year. And then you got some kind of like workhorse kind of guys on here that could be interesting as a backup, or like if the starter gets hurt, they might show up in a few games, like a Bilal Powell maybe. Like I feel like he's got a little bit left, not as a starter, but no. I'm looking.
Then we're getting into the point where the draft class comes in. I think that there's several players that are better than Bilal Powell in this year's draft class. So I'm not sure that really is going to be anything interesting in terms of fantasy.
Yeah. All right. Any other running backs before we move on to the wide receivers? Okay.
I don't have the list in front of me, so I'm counting on you.
Oh man, I am all about this free agency business. We mentioned Dez Bryant falling into a pile of Legos earlier. Is he going to fall into a pile of Legos in Dallas or somewhere else?
Well, it's interesting, this whole unfortunate thing with the video. I mean, I don't know if there's anything to this. It's kind of obviously poorly timed for him. I have a notion that if there's it seems like there's some extortion going on. But I have a feeling that in the end he's gonna, everything, it's gonna blow over, and he'll be in Dallas. Or even if it doesn't blow over, I still think he'll remain a Cowboy. I think that the Cowboys really want to keep him, unless there's some like really horrendous thing on an actual tape that would cause the league to rethink him being eligible entirely. I think that the Cowboys want him there long term. And they'll use their franchise tag on him if he doesn't sign a long-term deal.
Yeah, and another guy that I think will probably land back with his team is Demaryius Thomas. I don't think there's any way the Broncos let Thomas walk here. I think they'd rather let Julius Thomas leave than Demaryius Thomas. Do you think that they'll retain him?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of chatter about them using the franchise tag on Demaryius Thomas if they don't sign him to a long-term deal. So I would imagine that's the route they'll go.
Yeah, me too. Now, the guy that I think might actually end up leaving is Randall Cobb. I think he may end up being the top free agent wide receiver that actually gets let loose to test the market from his team. Cobb, obviously the Packers want him back. I don't know. You're more familiar with some of these teams' salary cap situations. Do you think that Cobb will come back? They have the room to re-sign him?
The Packers do have the room to re-sign him. They just released A.J. Hawk, getting another $3.5 million. But I think that Ted Thompson's kind of a notoriously frugal guy, general manager. They got a real steal of a deal with Jordy Nelson a couple years ago, and they're still they're way underpaying him. That won't happen with Cobb. Cobb had a career year last year, a perfect time. And I think he's good for him. I think that he needs to go out and get the money that he can get right now. I'm not sure that the Packers are going to be willing to pay him as much as the market will. So there's a lot of chatter about him maybe going to the Raiders, who have a ton of cap space.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I mean, the Raiders have had all this.
There's like a Green Bay to Oakland pipeline, thanks to Reggie McKenzie. So last year was James Jones. Now we got maybe Randall Cobb this year.
Oh man, I love the Raiders. They're the team closest to where I live, and that just seems like I don't know. I guess it could be okay. I guess it could be okay. Yeah. Maybe.
What, Randall Cobb? I think that would be a great move for them. I think they might overpay, but I think that's a great move.
That's kind of my point. Is I think that they would throw a ton of cash at him.
You were going to say a crap ton. It's okay. You could say
I was going to say a crap ton. Trying to keep it G-rated, but we'll go to PG here a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if Cobb does, let's say, go back to the Packers, the next guy on the list who I think might be interesting, it's sounding like he's going to get away from his team, is Torrey Smith. Baltimore, again, would probably love to re-sign him. They have a good chance of bringing their people back, but they also tend to not pay top dollar to bring their guys back. Do you think Torrey Smith escapes and goes somewhere else?
I think he has a lot less market value than guys like Randall Cobb and Dez Bryant. So it might be that he tests the waters and doesn't like what he sees and just comes back to Baltimore. But who knows? Maybe some team thinks that the Ravens didn't use him well, that Joe Flacco didn't get him the ball enough, and will be willing to pay more than the Ravens are willing to pay. And the Ravens could use the draft this year. There are some good players, and also some free agents that they might be able to sign. But they just let go of Jacoby Jones, so it's not like they're overloaded at wide receiver right now.
Yeah, that's true. As I look down the list a little bit more, it sort of drops off pretty quickly for me. But which of these guys do you like the most? Jeremy Maclin, Michael Crabtree, or Cecil Shorts?
I like Jeremy Maclin. I mean, I thought that he bounced back from the torn ACL, had a great year. He was he was primed before he tore his ACL. He was kind of primed to be elevated into that role. And I think that it wasn't all Chip Kelly. I think that he looked really good last year. I think he's the best of those three, and he proved that he was healthy after that ACL. So I like him the best. I think I would expect the Eagles to try to re-sign him, although there's some chatter about him, moving on. But that'd be losing their number one receiver 2 years in a row.
Yeah, that'd be pretty rough. And I don't think the Niners are going to bring Crabtree back, and I wonder if he's going to get a big contract from someone who has hope.
No, he hasn't been the same since he got that. He had the torn Achilles a couple years ago, and he just hasn't been the same. Some of that has to do with the offense. I think that Colin Kaepernick wasn't the best quarterback for him, but I think that he could thrive maybe in New England. That's a great situation for him, but just not a guy that's going to get a lot of money.
Yeah. There's no other big receivers here that stand out to me. What do you think about Reggie Wayne? Is he just done?
Yeah, I mean he's, I believe, 35. He came back from injury and did all right last year, but Father Time catches us all. It looked like it caught up to him last year, so I think that the Colts might maybe they'll bring him back as kind of a veteran presence, maybe a third or fourth guy, but I think that they might be looking in free agency or the draft to replace him.
Yeah, and I look at other names on here like Ted Ginn, and every time I see Ted Ginn, I just shake my head because we're Dolphins fans, and as soon as that pick happened,
I'm breaking out in cold sweats. But the funny thing is, as soon as that pick happened, everybody was really angry because they didn't pick Brady Quinn. So it's like we escaped Brady Quinn at least, right? Yeah.
Brady Quinn is making a comeback.
He is making a comeback. You watch.
Yeah, those are rough times. Now, what about a couple of guys who are still technically on their teams, but could maybe get cut here, leading up to free agency? What about a guy like Mike Wallace? He seems a little bit, maybe he's going to play for Miami, maybe not. What do you think?
I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens with Mike Wallace and Andre Johnson in particular. I think that both those guys, Johnson a little less likely, but Wallace, the Dolphins were reportedly shopping him in a trade today. There was a report, and that would be the best way to get rid of him. I think they would save more money than if they just cut him outright, and they would get something in return. I imagine it's going to be tough to move him because he's got like almost $10 million in salary due this year, but they could restructure as well. I actually think he's going to be gone one way or another. I think he's going to move on. I think the Dolphins should move on from him. He scored 10 touchdowns last year, but touchdowns are fluky. He's not like a Calvin Johnson type that's going to go up and get a bunch of touchdowns. He made some great plays, but he didn't make a lot of plays, and that's why I think they need to get rid of him in that salary. Johnson's a different story. His cap number is something like $16 million. The Texans don't have a lot of cap space right now, and he's kind of getting long in the tooth. I think he's like 33 years old, and I'm not sure that he even wants to be there right now with their quarterback situation. The defense is pretty good, but it doesn't seem like they're going to be contenders anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, maybe J.J. Watt will be playing quarterback this year. I don't know.
Well, he is their best quarterback right now.
Yeah.
And tight end. And offensive lineman, probably.
Yeah. A guy that was a little bit of a question mark earlier in the offseason was Larry Fitzgerald, but he restructured his contract. He's going to be staying in Arizona. What do you think that does for his fantasy stock and for the other sort of pass catchers there, assuming Carson Palmer is back and healthy, I guess?
Well, it's funny because I think Larry Fitzgerald would have benefited from going somewhere else. He's really loyal to the Cardinals, as we've seen many times. This is just the one of many times that he's done. He's re-signed with them and did them favors, and that's great that's great. But from a fantasy standpoint, that's not the best situation. He's gonna go down as like the best receiver in history. That wasn't right. Like he could have been great. And he was great at one point, but statistically he just didn't have the quarterbacks. And Carson Palmer is better than what he had before, but I don't think that it was a great situation for him from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah. I think this is bad for his fantasy stock. That whole passing attack seemed in disarray without Carson Palmer. It was okay with him, but man, I don't like Fitz's chances for a bounce back here.
Yeah, he's also getting older, so he's kind of getting a little bit at the end of his prime now.
Yeah, agreed. Before we move on to tight ends, talk a little bit about cap space here, because I think that plays into kind of who these teams are going to target and which teams are going to target certain positions coming up, especially at the tight end position, with a couple of potential big name signees are floating around. What's the cap space landscape right now?
Well, there's a few teams that have a ton of cap space. The Jaguars, the Raiders, the Browns, and the Jets have a lot of cap space. The Titans look like they're going to have a lot too. On from there, the Colts, Bengals, and Packers have a pretty good amount of space too. So it'll be interesting. All those teams need a lot of players. So you mentioned tight end. The Jaguars need one. The Raiders need one. The Browns are going to need one. It looks like Jordan Cameron doesn't want to come back. The Jets, they have Jason Morrow, but maybe they could use one. The Titans have Delaney Walker, so they don't need one. But those are teams that are going to be on the market to spend a lot of money. And
how about the teams that are kind of hosed here in free agency?
Well, there's always it looks bleak, right? There's the Saints are the worst by far. They're over $20 million over the cap, and they're going to have to cut a lot to even get to the cap. They'll do some restructuring, I'm sure. Patriots, they're over the cap right now, but that's because Darrelle Revis is counting for $25 million against their cap. Either they're going to let him go or they're going to restructure him, or rather re-sign him. And lower that cap number, and I think they'll be fine. And the Rams, the 49ers, the Dolphins, those are all in bad shape. The Steelers and the Chiefs, but restructuring, cutting, all that stuff, they'll be fine. They'll probably have enough space to do something in free agency, except for the Saints. I think the Saints are just not going to sign anybody this year.
Yeah. They're going to have to kind of roll with what they got. Let's jump to tight ends here. Probably the three top names on the list here: Julius Thomas, Jordan Cameron, Charles Clay. It sounds like Clay is going to sign back with the Dolphins. It sounds like it's leaning that way. So maybe the two guys that are going to get cut loose here is maybe Julius Thomas and Jordan Cameron. Do you think they'll go back to their teams?
It sounds like Jordan Cameron doesn't want to go to the Browns. It sounds like he wants to go somewhere else. And
that's shocking. The Browns seemed like a pretty,
really well-run organization, the Browns. And
yeah.
They have a new logo. It's slightly brighter orange, and
I hear it's closer
yeah,
to the Bengals orange.
it's very close to the. It is actually, but yeah, I mean the problem with Cameron is his injury history. So he's a little bit iffy wherever he lands. He's got the concussions, which are kind of scary, and his next one could be knock him out of the league. Julius Thomas is a different story. I think that the Broncos may not simply have room for him on the with their salary cap. They're in the middle of the pack, but they're going to have to either resign or tag Demaryius Thomas, and they have other needs, so they might choose to go with the cheaper option or somebody in the draft. So he could land somewhere else. He might maybe a Jaguars target or a Raiders target.
Yeah, the Jaguars have so much cap space that they seem to be the sort of prime, rumor-filled team that's going to target everybody. But Julius Thomas has been especially high on the rumor mill radar for maybe going to Jacksonville if he leaves Denver. I'm looking down the list of tight ends here. Jermaine Gresham is up for grabs here.
I mean, he's always had kind of been an enticing guy that just didn't do well. Towards the end of the year, he started catching a lot of passes last year. The Bengals didn't think enough of him to really say that they're going to bring him back. I think that they're moving on. So I think he's just a guy.
Yeah. Hey, Tony Moeaki's available again.
Yeah. We saw. Yeah. I mean, he went to the Seahawks who needed a tight end, and he had one big catch. All right.
Yeah. What about Luke Stalker? Maybe I don't know. I'm really grasping.
You're digging deep, man. You're digging deep. I would rather take Max Williams than Luke Stalker. Max Williams is a rookie.
yeah, totally. You dig into the rookie class, and you find guys that you'd rather take their upside and potential over a lot of these guys that are going to be floating around. Any other tight ends jump out at you here?
No, I think that we've touched on the guys that are really important, I guess, in free agency. Maybe there's one or two guys. I know that the Ravens might be looking to, speaking of teams that need it, the Ravens. It looks like Dennis Pitta might be retiring. My condolences to Denny Carter. So it looks like they might be looking to replace him.
Yeah. And Owen Daniels is a free agent right now too. He's an
interesting option, I think, as well. Maybe. Depends on where he lands. Maybe Daniels is the kind of guy like if he lands with the Broncos as a cheap option, could have a big year actually. But
there's lots of
any tight end that lands with Peyton Manning, keep an eye out.
Right, exactly. Yep. I don't really see anybody else on the list that gets me excited there. Tell them about some of the articles you've been writing over at Bleacher Report that they should check out, kind of related to these topics.
Oh man, I've written extensively about free agency. Teams that play one move that each team should make, one player that could be a cap casualty. We've already seen some of the ones that I thought could be cap casualties: D'Angelo Williams, Reggie Bush. I thought Larry Fitzgerald, was a good candidate, but he restructured. So there's that. There, I did a nice write-up on the franchise tags. I thought that, it was interesting dive into how the franchise tag works and some guys that might be tagged. I just came out with the Combine power ranking, the top 25 Combine performances. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about free agency. So anyway, go over to Bleacher Report and find me and see all these interesting articles, I think.
Nice. Yeah, you've been working hard, man.
Yeah, no, thanks.
And you can also find some of our stuff over at Football Guys as well. I posted my last normalized strength of schedule that sort of wraps up last year and sort of looks ahead to the strength of schedule of 2015. We may not know the dates that all the games will be played, but we do know what all the matchups are going to be. So you can start thinking about 2015 strength of schedule a little bit. And we got lots of great content coming at you at Football Guys, even during the offseason. And it's free up until, I think, the draft. So, take a look at that free content for the next couple of months. And, give us a spin. See whether you like the Football Guys stuff. As always, check us out on the9route.com for all information about this podcast. You can get a hold of Alex on Twitter, at AlexMelio. You can find me at AustinNFL. And, until next time, may your players stay healthy, your sleepers wake up, and your Monday nights be filled with miraculous comebacks, even in the off-season. Good night.
Everything is awesome.
Everything is awesome when you're part of the team.